It is a truly fascinating, almost entirely universal phenomenon. You might be the kind of person who is perfectly capable of commanding a high-stakes boardroom, right?
Oh, absolutely. The kind of person who just thrives under pressure.
Exactly. You can stand up in front of a hostile board of directors, present a complex, like multi-million-dollar project, and handle incredibly aggressive Q&A sessions with absolute grace.
Yeah, you walk out with a major victory.
You do. You are a master of corporate strategy, a wizard of logic, someone who just dominates under professional scrutiny.
Right.
But then, a few weeks later, you walk through the front door of your parents' house for a simple holiday dinner.
And it all just completely falls apart.
It really does. You are sitting at the table, someone passes the gravy, a relative makes one seemingly innocuous comment about your career choices or, I don't know, your lifestyle, and suddenly you are completely dismantled.
Yeah, that impenetrable armor you wear in the professional world just evaporates into thin air.
Poof, gone. You find yourself reverting to the emotional state of a highly defensive teenager. The conversation turns into an absolute minefield, and you are left sitting there in the aftermath wondering, how did I lose control of that situation so quickly?
It is the ultimate paradox of human communication, honestly, and it happens to almost everyone.
I mean, I've been there.
Oh, we all have. We spend years, sometimes decades, acquiring these sophisticated vocabularies and emotional regulation strategies for our public and professional lives.
Like learning how to negotiate, how to de-escalate.
Exactly. How to manage stakeholders. And we operate under this false assumption that those exact same tools will just naturally, seamlessly translate to our personal lives.
But they don't, do they?
Not at all, because the family environment operates on an entirely different frequency. It is an ecosystem governed not by logic, not by quarterly earnings or objective metrics, but by decades of shared history.
Deeply ingrained hierarchical expectations.
Yes. And this incredibly dense, often suffocating web of emotional obligations. When you walk into that dining room, you aren't just walking into a conversation.
You're walking into a trap.
Well, you are walking into a complex psychological matrix where every single word carries the weight of a 20 or 30-year backstory.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to explore what is arguably the absolute apex of communication challenges, which is navigating your own family.
It really is the ultimate test.
It is. And today's deep dive is built on an incredible stack of sources we've gathered for you. We are pulling from sociolinguistic research papers on familial dispute resolution, transcripts of high-stakes family mediations, and an absolute masterclass of a book that treats interpersonal language not as a soft skill, but as an advanced tactical art form.
Which is such a refreshing way to look at it.
Right. So the goal today is to extract the advanced vocabulary and the hidden discourse strategies from these sources that you need not just to survive, but to actually thrive in these high-stakes familial conversations.
Because, as we're going to see, family conversations are rarely just about who is carving the turkey or what time everyone is arriving.
No, those logistical details are almost always just the surface layer.
Yeah. The why behind this deep dive is crucial for you to understand right up front. Using advanced language in these intimate settings is not about trying to sound smart.
Right. Nobody wants to be that guy at Thanksgiving.
Exactly. It is not about intellectualizing your feelings to avoid them, and it is certainly not about manipulating the people you love.
So what is it about?
It is a profoundly necessary survival mechanism. Within the family, you use these specific linguistic frameworks to navigate legacy, to protect the fragile threads of relationships, and to negotiate your own independent identity within a system of incredibly powerful emotional bonds.
That makes a lot of sense.
And scientifically speaking, the brain actually processes family conflict differently than workplace conflict.
Wait, really? The brain handles it differently.
Oh, absolutely. When a colleague criticizes you, your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical center, can usually handle it. You process it objectively.
Okay.
But when a parent or a sibling does it, it often bypasses logic entirely and triggers the amygdala, sending you straight into fight, flight, or freeze. We literally need language that prevents that amygdala hijack.
I want to stop you right there because that neurological distinction is key.
Hey.
We aren't just dealing with difficult people. We're dealing with our own hardwired physiological reactions to those people.
Exactly. Your body is reacting as if it's in physical danger.
Right. And if you use a sledgehammer, which is what our unrefined, raw emotions often feel like in those moments of panic, you are going to break the relationship. You need absolute precision.
Precision is the exact right word.
And to execute these delicate operations, our sources suggest building what we are going to call a live-fire lexicon.
I love that term.
Yeah, it's great. These are precise, highly calibrated words that you can deploy in the heat of the moment to completely alter the trajectory of a conversation, bypassing that fight or flight response.
It's just exactly what we want to do.
So we're going to start by looking at a classic narrative that plays out in almost every family system, which is the tension between familial expectation and the desire for personal independence.
A tale as old as time?
Truly. And we have a set of 3 specific words that map out this exact struggle. Where do we start?
We begin with the concept of obligation, specifically how it is weaponized. The first word in our lexicon of legacy and rebellion is a formal and incredibly heavy one.
Okay, lay it on me.
The word is incumbent.
Incumbent.
Yes, it operates as an adjective, and in this context, it is almost always followed by the preposition upon.
Like it is incumbent upon you.
Right. To say something is incumbent upon someone means that it is a necessary duty. But the psychology behind how this word is used in a family is what you really need to grasp.
Okay, how so?
When a family member says it is incumbent upon you to do something like taking over the family business or moving closer to home, they are setting a massive psychological trap.
A trap.
Yes, they are taking their own subjective expectation and presenting it to you as an undeniable objective fact of the universe.
Wait, hold on. If someone tells me it's incumbent upon me, my immediate reaction isn't to sit back and analyze linguistic traps, you know?
Right, you just get defensive.
Yeah, my immediate reaction is just raw annoyance, maybe even anger. What is actually happening there? Are they doing this on purpose to trap me, or is it just like an old-fashioned vocabulary word that carries too much baggage?
It is rarely a conscious, malicious strategy on their part, which is actually what makes it so dangerous. It's an inherited discourse pattern.
Like something they learned from their parents.
Exactly. Look at the evolutionary psychology of that annoyance you just mentioned. You feel annoyed because your autonomy has just been threatened.
Oh, that makes sense.
By using the word incumbent, the speaker is attempting to bypass any negotiation entirely. It is a unilateral declaration of your duty.
Wow.
They are framing the conversation in such a way that rejecting their request is no longer just a difference of opinion.
It's something worse.
It is tantamount to a moral failure on your part. It shifts the burden of proof entirely onto you. You are no longer debating whether you should do the thing. You are suddenly forced to defend your own character for not wanting to do it.
That is so true.
Yeah.
So if a parent says, I really need you to take over the family business because I'm tired, I can logically respond with, I understand you're tired, but I have my own career.
Right. That's a negotiation of needs.
But if they say, as the eldest, it is incumbent upon you to preserve what we built, I've suddenly been put on trial for my loyalty to the family bloodline.
Exactly. It's a massive escalation masked as a formal request.
And that is exactly why you need to be able to identify it in real time.
Right. Yes. Once you recognize the incumbent trap, you can stop yourself from falling into the emotional pit of defending your character and instead focus on addressing the underlying expectation.
Which means we need an escape hatch.
We do.
If incumbent traps you in a locked room of perceived duty, how do you pick the lock without setting off the alarm? You need a linguistic tool that implies movement without implying destruction.
Beautifully put.
And that is where our second word comes in. And I think this might be one of the most brilliant strategic terms you can keep in your back pocket. The word is diverge.
Diverge, yes. In its simplest sense, it means to separate from a route and go in a different direction.
Right.
But its true metaphorical power in family dynamics lies in how it describes a departure from a standard, expected, or inherited path without assigning a negative value to that departure.
Let's play with an analogy here because I think the spatial dynamics of this word are just fascinating.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you and your family are driving in a convoy down a highway. This is the path of expectation.
Right, everyone's together, moving the same way.
Exactly. Now, if you want to leave that path and you use words like reject, abandon, or quit, which is what we usually do when we are feeling defensive, that is the conversational equivalent of saying, I am blowing up the bridge so you can't follow me, and I'm driving my car off a cliff.
Yeah, that's a very violent image.
It is. It implies destruction of the route itself, and it immediately triggers a massive threat response in the other cars.
Naturally.
But diverge is just saying, hey, you guys stay on the highway. I'm going to take the scenic route to the left. We are just going in different directions.
The beauty of that analogy is that it highlights the concept of parallel existence.
Yes.
If you blow up the bridge, you are throwing shrapnel at the people you love. You are invalidating their route in the process of choosing your own. The word diverge, actively de-escalates the emotional temperature of the room by completely removing the aggression from the act of separation.
It's so neutral.
It tells the other person's amygdala, there is no threat here. I am not attacking your choices or your legacy. I am simply charting a parallel course. It is a word of physics, really, not of warfare.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
If I am sitting in a highly charged emotional argument with my father about my career, and I suddenly say, my path must diverge from yours, isn't he just going to look at me like I'm an alien?
Probably, if you say it wrong.
Right. Doesn't that sound incredibly stiff? Like I'm reading from a corporate PR script.
That is a very valid concern, and it really comes down to the difference between vocabulary and tone. If you say it coldly with your arms crossed, yes, it will sound like a corporate dismissal.
I am diverging from this family.
Yeah, don't do that. But the word diverge is designed to be paired with genuine empathy. You aren't using it to create distance. You are using it to explain the distance that already exists.
Okay, that's a subtle but important difference.
When delivered with a tone of respect and sorrow, acknowledging that this separation is hard for both of you, it provides a safe container for the difficult truth. It prevents the other person from framing your departure as an attack.
So it's about giving them a softer concept to grapple with.
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly into the emotional aftermath of that divergence. If you diverge from the family path, there's inevitably going to be a sense of rupture.
Always.
And that requires our third word in this specific lexicon. The word is reconcile.
Reconcile.
Yeah.
In a standard definition, to reconcile means to find a way in which two or more ideas or facts that seem fundamentally opposed can exist together.
Right, like reconciling a bank statement.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of family systems, reconciling is not about compromise.
Right, it's not. Because when you reconcile a bank statement, the numbers just have to match up perfectly at the end of the month, and then you close the book and you're done.
Right, but not in a family. In a family, reconciling is almost never about finding a neat mathematical compromise where everyone gets exactly 50% of what they want.
That rarely happens anyway.
That is a boardroom concept. In the living room, reconciling is infinitely more complex. It is about the emotional and psychological capacity to hold two deeply conflicting truths in your mind and your heart at the exact same time without letting the friction between them destroy you.
Wow. It's like holding two repelling magnets together in your bare hands.
Exactly like that. It is the agonizing work of acknowledging I love you deeply and I respect everything you have sacrificed for me, while simultaneously holding the absolute truth that I cannot live the life you have planned for me.
That's tough.
It is. Cognitive dissonance is incredibly painful for the human brain. We naturally want to resolve it by choosing one side and demonizing the other.
Oh, for sure. It is much easier to say, my family is toxic, so I am cutting them off. Or, my family needs me, so I will abandon my own dreams.
It's the easy way out. Reconciling is the refusal to take that easy way out. It is the active, ongoing process of making peace with dual realities.
That is heavy. It's the emotional heavy lifting of being an adult, basically.
It really is.
So, we have our map for this terrain. We understand the crushing weight of perceived duty with incumbent, the neutral threat-reducing act of breaking away with diverge, and the agonizing emotional bridging required to reconcile those conflicting truths.
We have our toolkit.
Now, we are going to look at a case study from our source material that puts these three words into a live fire exercise. And I want to spend some real time analyzing the dynamics of this room, because the environment is just as important as the dialogue here.
The setting sets the stakes.
It absolutely does. I want you, the listener, to picture this scene. It is late evening. The setting is a sprawling, deeply traditional home. You can hear the steady crackling of a large, expensive fireplace.
Very cinematic.
Right. And there's the gentle, deliberate clink of a crystal glass being set down on a heavy mahogany desk. That desk is an important detail. It acts as a physical barrier and a symbol of authority.
It's a fortress.
Yes. We're in the study of Arthur, a formidable patriarch who took his father's small, struggling manufacturing firm and spent 40 years expanding it into a regional empire.
This is a man who builds things.
Exactly. Sitting across from him in a slightly lower leather chair, also a key detail, is his son, Ethan. Ethan is in his late 20s. He is brilliant, driven, but his passions lie in a completely different universe. He wants to lead a cutting-edge AI development team in another city.
A completely different world from manufacturing.
Total opposite.
Yeah.
Arthur has called Ethan into this study, this fortress of his legacy, to discuss the future.
This is the classic Textbook succession crisis right here. And the tension in the room is palpable before anyone even speaks. Arthur's entire identity is fused with that company.
How does he start?
He opens the dialogue not with a question, but by establishing a historical premise. He reminds Ethan of the grandfather who built the foundation, the sacrifices Arthur himself made to expand it. He is basically building a verbal monument in the middle of the room.
Setting the stage.
And then he deploys our first word. He looks at Ethan and says, "Ethan, we have reached a critical juncture. Soon it will be incumbent upon you to take the reins."
Let's freeze the frame right there.
Yeah.
Notice the absolute certainty in Arthur's framing. He doesn't say, "Ethan, I would love it if you consider taking the reins," or "Have you given any thought to the succession plan?"
No questions.
He frames it as a preordained destiny. He is laying that trap of perceived fact.
And he immediately reinforces that trap with institutional pressure. Arthur follows up by stating casually that he has already had preliminary discussions with the board of directors about Ethan transitioning to the CEO role in 5 years.
Which is terrifying.
A massive power play.
Arthur is actively trying to close all the exits before Ethan even realizes the doors have been shut. He's using the weight of the board, the weight of the grandfather, the weight of the word incumbent. He is trying to trigger Ethan's compliance through sheer atmospheric pressure.
Absolutely.
So how does Ethan respond? Because if I were Ethan, sitting in that lower chair, my instinct would be to either completely cave in and say, "Okay," or panic, stand up and yell, "I don't want your stupid company."
Which is totally natural. Both of those are the amygdala talking freeze or flight. But Ethan has prepared for this. He manages his own physiological response.
How?
He doesn't panic, and crucially, he does not attack Arthur's monument. He starts by validating the history. He says, "Dad, I have spent my entire life admiring what you and Grandpa built. It is a masterpiece of industry."
So he secures the foundation of the relationship first.
Exactly. But then he makes a strategic move. He takes a deep breath, deliberately slows his cadence, and says, "But this is where my path must diverge from the one you've so carefully laid out for me."
There's that word, diverge. But let's look at Arthur's reaction because it proves your point earlier about how hard it is to break these patterns.
It's not magic. It doesn't instantly solve the argument.
Right. Arthur is exactly what you'd expect from a patriarch who is used to bending the world to his will. He is stunned. He practically scoffs. He points out that Ethan accepted a high-level job offer at a tech firm without discussing it with the family.
Which Arthur sees as a betrayal.
Totally. Arthur calls the manufacturing firm Ethan's birthright and his absolute duty. Arthur is furiously clinging to that incumbent mindset. He is trying to force the conversation back into a binary loyalty versus betrayal.
Because Arthur is experiencing a sudden loss of control and he is reacting with institutional aggression.
But Ethan holds his ground within that neutral space he created.
Yes. He doesn't take the bait. He responds by redefining the concept of duty entirely. Ethan says, "My duty is to build something I can be profoundly proud of, just as you did. If I stayed here, in this chair, I would merely be a custodian of your dream. I would not be a creator. I would be living your life, not my own."
That's a powerful statement. And then Ethan brings out the heaviest emotional tool in the box. He leans forward, bridging that physical gap over the mahogany desk, and says, "The most difficult thing for me over these last 6 months has been trying to reconcile the profound respect I have for our family's history with the undeniable fact that my future lies elsewhere."
This raises an important question, one we really need to dissect. Why does Ethan choose to expose his own internal, painful struggle to his father?
Especially to a man who is actively trying to dominate the conversation.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive to show weakness to an opponent.
But that's just it, right?
Yeah.
Because he's realizing Arthur isn't an opponent.
Precisely. The answer is that Ethan is using vulnerability as an advanced discourse strategy. He isn't just delivering a verbal resignation letter. He is actively inviting his father into his emotional process.
Wow.
By using the word reconcile and admitting how difficult it has been for him, Ethan makes his internal cognitive dissonance the focal point of the conversation, rather than allowing the conflict to simply be Ethan's desires versus Arthur's demands.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Ethan is engaging in what the source material beautifully terms a respectful rebellion.
That's such a great phrase.
It is. Listen to how he continues to justify his departure. Arthur accuses him of trading a tangible brick-and-mortar legacy for a fleeting digital trend, framing Ethan's choice as a total rejection of the family's core values. But Ethan flips the script.
What does he say?
He says he is actually trying to build his own legacy by utilizing the exact principles Arthur taught him: relentless hard work, innovation, and integrity. He is essentially saying, I am taking your tools, the values you instilled in me, but I am going to build a different house with them.
That's brilliant.
He explicitly states, I am not rejecting you, Dad. I am asking you to see that my diverging path doesn't diminish my love for this family. He is literally pleading with his father to help him reconcile these concepts.
And Arthur's response to this is incredibly realistic. The sources don't give us a Hollywood ending here.
Right, there's no dramatic hug.
No. It would be a fairy tale if Arthur suddenly smiled, poured 2 glasses of scotch, and said, Son, I understand perfectly. Go build AI with my blessing.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Real life, especially with decades of entrenched expectations, just does not work that way. Arthur goes silent. He stares into the fire for a long time.
The cinematic silence.
And then he admits that, at this moment, he only understands that the chain is being broken. He feels the loss acutely, but he explicitly acknowledges Ethan's request. Arthur says quietly, You ask me to reconcile 2 things that feel fundamentally at odds. I will need some time.
It's a cliffhanger. It's unresolved, it's painful, and it feels incredibly heavy. But tell me, from a sociolinguistic and psychological standpoint, why do our sources consider this to be a highly successful conversation?
Because it didn't blow up.
Right, because I know a lot of people who would walk out of that study feeling like they just failed, like they just broke their father's heart.
It is considered a profound success precisely because of what it avoided. It avoided a scorched earth rupture. Ethan successfully dismantled a binary conflict.
A binary conflict.
Yeah, binary conflict is I win, you lose, or my freedom versus your legacy. If Ethan had used aggressive language, if he had blown up the bridge, Arthur would have entrenched himself, the betrayal would have been cemented, and the relationship might have been permanently severed.
But he didn't do that.
No, instead, Ethan transformed that dangerous binary conflict into a shared emotional puzzle. He essentially handed his father a complex knot and said, I know this is incredibly hard to untangle, and I know it hurts, but we have to do it together.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The conversation doesn't end with a neat solution, but it ends with a new, undeniably honest and more complex understanding of the relationship. The door remains open. That is the absolute hallmark of effective communication in high-stakes family environments.
I think that is incredibly empowering for anyone listening who is currently dreading a conversation like this. Success doesn't mean everyone is happy and smiling at the end.
It really doesn't.
Success means you maintained your truth, you honored the relationship, and you kept the dialogue alive, even if it hurts in the short term. The words you choose diverge instead of quit, reconcile instead of choose. They dictate whether that door to the future stays open or slams permanently shut.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we are going to pivot our focus entirely. We spent a lot of time in the boardroom of the family dealing with the grand sweeping arcs of generational ambition and succession.
The high drama.
The high drama, exactly. But the family unit isn't just about legacy. Often it's about the incredibly grinding, unglamorous, day-to-day practical realities of life.
Messy stuff.
The messy stuff. And one of the most fraught territories any family will ever navigate is the care of aging parents. This brings a completely different set of linguistic challenges. It's no longer about ambition, it's about survival, safety, and money.
The stakes are completely different.
They really are. So we have a new lexicon to help navigate this deeply emotional terrain.
Yes. Moving from the philosophical to the deeply practical requires an entirely different set of linguistic tools. When dealing with elder care, the emotional stakes are often tied to physical safety and deep-seated fears of mortality.
So what's our first word here?
The first word in our lexicon of care and conflict is contentious.
Contentious.
It means causing, or highly likely to cause, an argument, something that is fundamentally controversial. In a family setting, a contentious issue is a known flashpoint. It's the radioactive topic that everyone usually tiptoes around at Thanksgiving.
It's such a great word. Just saying it sounds prickly. Contentious.
It does have a bite to it.
But wait, if I am walking into a highly emotional room to discuss my aging mother, and I use a stiff academic word like contentious, isn't my family just going to think I'm acting arrogant?
How so?
Doesn't calling a topic contentious just make people immediately defensive? Like, oh, here we go, here's Mr. Vocabulary.
That is a brilliant question, and it touches on the concept of meta-communication.
Meta-communication.
Yes, communicating about how you are communicating. You aren't using the word contentious to insult them, you are using it to validate the shared reality.
Oh, I see.
Using the word contentious right at the beginning of a conversation is the verbal equivalent of holding up a bright yellow warning sign. You are explicitly telling the other person, hey, we're about to walk into a minefield. We both know there is a history of disagreement here. We both have scars from this topic, so we both need to tread very carefully and put our armor away.
So it's a preemptive strike against reactivity.
Exactly. By naming the tension, you rob it of its ambush power.
Okay, that makes sense. You're acknowledging the elephant in the room instead of waiting for it to step on someone.
Precisely.
And once you've named the tension, you need a way to navigate through it. Our second word is the antidote to the emotional overwhelm that almost always accompanies contentious topics. The word is pragmatic.
Pragmatic. To be pragmatic means dealing with things sensibly and realistically in a way that is based on...
It's lofty. It's filled with wonderful sentiments about how things should be. Like, Mom should always live in the house she built. Dad should be surrounded by his garden.
Which sounds wonderful in theory.
Right. But that balloon, as beautiful as it is, can easily float away into pure delusion and physical danger if you aren't careful. The word pragmatic is the heavy iron anchor that you tie to that balloon.
To keep it tethered.
Exactly. It stops the conversation from floating away into fantasy and firmly grounds it back in the harsh reality of logistics. It forces everyone to look at the actual math time, money, physical lifting, and medical safety.
And to build on your hot air balloon analogy, the real danger isn't just that the balloon floats away.
What is it?
The danger is that while one sibling is in the basket enjoying the beautiful idealistic view, the other sibling is on the ground, desperately holding onto the rope, getting severe rope burn, trying to keep the whole thing tethered to reality.
Ouch. That is a visceral image, but so true.
Pragmatism forces the person in the basket to look down and acknowledge the friction happening on the ground. And if that friction is ignored, if the pragmatic reality is dismissed in favor of the idealistic fantasy, we arrive at our third word.
What is?
This word represents the ultimate terminal danger in family systems. The word is resentment.
Resentment. Oh, man. It's the absolute poison of family systems. It is the acid that eats through the pipes when you aren't looking.
Poison is the right word. Resentment is a feeling of bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly, but we really need to distinguish it from anger.
How are they different?
Anger is a spark. It flashes hot and fast. Resentment is carbon monoxide.
Silent and deadly.
Exactly. It is a slow-burning, invisible, incredibly corrosive emotion. It builds up over time, layer by microscopic layer, usually when duties, physical burdens, or financial costs are perceived to be unequally distributed among family members over long periods.
So we have our 3 stages of a difficult family decision. You have the deeply contentious subject. You desperately need the pragmatic approach to solve it. And if you fail to manage the communication around it, you end up with the dreaded relationship-killing resentment.
That's the roadmap.
Well, let's look at our second case study to see this dynamic play out in real time.
This one is very relatable.
I want you to imagine a tense phone call. There's a slight static on the line, emphasizing the physical and emotional distance between the speakers. We have 2 sisters in their 40s. Olivia is the one on the ground. She lives 10 minutes from their childhood home and is dealing with the grinding day-to-day reality of their mother's fading memory.
The rope burn, basically.
Yeah, actually, the rope burn. Things like finding the stove left on, the mail piling up, the missed medications. Then you have Chloe, the other sister, who lives 500 miles away. Chloe is weary from her own life, but she is fiercely clinging to this idealistic notion of keeping their mother in the childhood home.
It's weaponized nostalgia.
Weaponized nostalgia, yes. So Olivia calls Chloe to initiate a conversation they've both been avoiding for months.
Right from the beginning of this call, Olivia deploys a masterclass in tactical framing. She's exhausted, but she consciously regulates her tone.
What does she do?
After establishing the recent facts that their mother is physically okay right now, but her memory is rapidly failing and safety is becoming a daily crisis, Olivia doesn't just launch into a list of demands or complaints.
Which would be the natural instinct.
Right. Instead, she says, Chloe, we can't keep pretending that a daily phone call is enough to keep her safe. This has become a highly contentious topic between us, I know, but we have to face it today.
Boom. There is the bright yellow warning label. She names the tension immediately. She doesn't accuse Chloe of ignoring the problem. She frames the topic as the problem.
Exactly. But Chloe reacts with classic idealism anyway.
Of course she does.
She says, I know. The thought of her not being in her own home, packing up all those memories, it feels so cruel. It's the house we grew up in, Liv. Chloe is floating away in that hot air balloon of sentimentality.
And she isn't wrong to feel that way, right? Grief makes us cling to the familiar.
Absolutely. But it isn't solving the immediate, terrifying danger of the stove being left on. So Olivia has to pull out the anchor.
And she does so with incredible emotional intelligence. Olivia validates Chloe's feelings first. She says, I know I love this house too. It breaks my heart. But then she immediately transitions to reality. She says, but I am here, Chloe. I see it every single day. We have to be pragmatic.
There's the anchor.
Right. She lays out the logistics without exaggeration. She works full-time. She cannot be on call 24/7. And they simply do not have the financial resources for full-time, round-the-clock, in-home nursing. Having established the boundaries of reality, she then presents the pragmatic solution. A highly rated assisted living option just 10 minutes from her own house.
Now, notice Chloe's immediate defensive reaction. This is the pivot point where most family arguments blow up into decade-long feuds.
Oh, yeah.
Chloe feels like she is being informed, not consulted. The illusion of her involvement has been punctured by Olivia's boots-on-the-ground reality. Chloe snaps back. So you've already decided. You picked a place without me, and you're just calling to inform me that we're moving, Mom. She feels entirely sidelined, and she accuses Olivia of being dictatorial.
In 99% of families, Olivia would snap back here. I mean, she has all the justification in the world to lose her temper. She would say, well, you aren't here doing the work. You're 500 miles away living your life while I'm cleaning up messes, so yes, I have to decide.
And then the war begins, which explodes.
Exactly. But Olivia doesn't do that. So what does this all mean? How does Olivia, who is exhausted and underappreciated, save this conversation from turning into a full-blown, bridge-burning sibling war right at this critical juncture?
What's fascinating here is how Olivia manages her own justified anger in order to execute a flawless linguistic pivot. The transcript notes that her voice tightens. She's clearly frustrated, but she refuses to attack Chloe's character or her absence.
It takes so much restraint.
It does. She clarifies her intention calmly. She says, I'm doing the legwork because I'm physically here, but I need you to make the decision with me.
Okay, bringing her back into the fold.
Yes, but the absolute masterstroke is how she deploys the concept of resentment. She says to Chloe, Chloe, listen to me. If we let this drift because it's emotionally difficult to make a choice, the only thing that will grow is resentment. And I do not want that between us. I need my sister.
I have to tell you, the psychology of that move is stunning. She externalizes the threat entirely.
Exactly. Look at what she didn't say. She doesn't say, you are making me resentful by sitting 500 miles away and doing nothing.
Which would be a direct accusation.
Right. An attack on Chloe's identity as a good daughter, which would only increase Chloe's defensiveness and trigger a counterattack. Instead, Olivia personifies resentment. She turns it into a third-party entity, like a monster in the room with them.
Watch out for the monster.
Exactly. She is essentially saying, look, Chloe, you and I are on the same team. We love each other. But there is this monster called resentment creeping up on us, and if we don't work together to solve this pragmatic problem right now, that monster is going to wake up and devour our relationship.
It is a profound shift from an adversarial posture, you against me, to a collaborative one. Us against the problem. I need you to be my partner in this, not my critic. It's such a powerful boundary, but it's delivered with an explicit invitation for connection.
And look at the resolution. Because of Olivia's incredibly masterful framing, Chloe does not double down on her defensiveness. The linguistic strategy actually breaches her armor, bypassing the amygdala.
It actually worked.
It did. Chloe pauses. The transcript notes you can hear her take a shaky breath, and she actually apologizes. She admits the core, painful truth that was hiding behind her nostalgia.
What does she say?
She says, I'm sorry. It's just easier for me to be idealistic from 500 miles away. You're the one bearing the brunt of it, and I feel guilty. She explicitly agrees that she doesn't want resentment to destroy them. And then she yields to the pragmatic partnership. She asks Olivia to send the link to the facility and says they will look at the floor plans together.
Wow. It perfectly illustrates how, even across hundreds of miles and deep emotionally fraught divides, language can be consciously utilized to repair rifts and align family members on a shared, albeit very painful, path forward.
It wasn't about who was right or wrong about the childhood house. It was about managing the emotional current underneath the decision. Olivia saved her relationship with her sister not by being nicer, but by being communicatively precise.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the high-stakes, corporate-adjacent succession drama of Arthur and Ethan to the deeply poignant, everyday caregiver dilemma of Olivia and Chloe. I want to bring this entire deep dive back to you, the listener.
Let's bring it home.
We have analyzed these incredibly intricate discourse strategies, the neurology of family conflict, and the power of specific vocabulary. But what is the ultimate goal here? When you go home for the next holiday, why should you care enough to exert the mental energy required to practice using words like diverge, reconcile, contentious, and pragmatic when you're sitting across from your own family members?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute core takeaway from all of our sources is this: in the realm of complex family dynamics, the goal is rarely, if ever, to win the argument.
Winning is an illusion.
It is. Winning is a concept designed for the courtroom, the battlefield, or the boardroom. In a family, if you win by verbally obliterating your sibling or humiliating your parent, you actually lose.
You win the battle, lose the war.
Right. The relationship sustains permanent, sometimes irreparable damage. You might win the argument about the house, but you lose a sister. The true objective is to preserve the relationship while simultaneously honoring your own personal truth and carrying out your shared responsibilities.
It requires a staggeringly delicate balance of empathy and intention.
It does. It means acknowledging the heavy weight of an incumbent expectation without letting it crush your autonomy. It means finding a pragmatic path through a contentious issue before the slow poison of resentment destroys the foundation of your shared history.
I think that is so important to internalize. Advanced language is not a weapon you use to defeat your family. It is not a tool to outsmart them or make them feel small. It's a bridge-building tool.
A bridge-building tool, exactly.
When you consciously choose to use the word diverge instead of reject, you are actively lowering the emotional temperature in the room. When you frame a difficult topic as contentious before diving into the gritty details, you are providing emotional scaffolding for the other person to lean on.
You're guiding them.
You are taking responsibility for the climate of the conversation. You are telling them, I care enough about you and about us to communicate with absolute precision.
It is an act of profound care, masquerading as advanced vocabulary. By choosing these words, you are signaling to their nervous system that you value the connection more than you value being perceived as right.
I want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the art form of language and the hidden machinery of complex family dynamics. It is not an easy subject to dissect because it touches on the most vulnerable parts of our lives, but it is universally relevant.
We all have a family of some sort to navigate.
Exactly. We've spent a lot of time today focusing heavily on the active application of this material, how you can wield these specific words to chart a safer course through difficult conversations. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own, something that builds on everything we've discussed, but flips the perspective entirely.
A shift from the active execution of language to the receptive decoding of it.
Exactly. We've talked about how you can speak these frameworks to change the outcome. But consider the flip side. What happens when you start actively listening for these precise conversational frameworks coming out of the mouths of your own relatives?
That's a game changer.
Think back to that holiday dinner we talked about at the very beginning of the show, the one where your professional armor disappears and you feel like a teenager again. The next time you are sitting there, what if you stopped just reacting emotionally to what your family says and started listening analytically?
It's like suddenly seeing the matrix code behind the argument.
Right. If you can recognize in real time when a parent or a sibling is unconsciously laying that incumbent trap to force a guilt-ridden obligation on you, or if you can hear the strain in their voice and realize they are desperately struggling to reconcile their own internal puzzles about the person you have grown up to become, could you change the outcome before a fight even starts?
You could diagnose it before it explodes.
If you quietly diagnose the discourse strategy they are using, could you effectively de-escalate generational conflicts simply by understanding the mechanics of their fear? Imagine the absolute power of not just choosing your own words wisely, but truly decoding theirs with empathy. Until next time, keep listening and keep diving deep. So, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine you're sitting across from your absolute closest friend.
Right.
Or, maybe it's your business partner of like 10 years. Or even your spouse.
Oh, wow. High stakes.
Exactly. Incredibly high stakes. You're looking at them, and with absolute terrifying certainty that the next 6 words you say are going to completely destroy the shared reality you've built together.
It's just permanent detonation.
Yeah, exactly. You're literally about to detonate a bomb in the middle of your own life. So the question is, what words do you choose?
Do you apologize?
Right. Do you get defensive? Do you try to soften the blow?
Mostly people just panic.
They do. And that's why today we're not just, learning vocabulary to pass some standardized tests. We are doing a deep dive into language as a high-stakes survival tool. Because for the most critical, devastating human interactions, words are all you have.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of linguistic life or death, socially speaking.
Yeah.
When you reach a point where the person you're becoming is just no longer compatible with the environment you are currently in.
The environment you're stuck in.
Exactly. The words you use to either bridge that gap or sever that tie completely, well, they dictate whether you actually survive the transition.
Or if you just get buried under the rubble.
Precisely. Which brings us to the actual source material for today's deep dive.
Yes. I was looking through the documents we pulled for today, and it's this fascinating transcript from an advanced English learning program.
Right, but it doesn't read like a standard textbook at all.
Not even a little bit. It features these 2 analysts, John and Emma, and they are examining what they call let me make sure I get the quote right, the nuanced architecture of high-stakes conversations.
Nuanced architecture. I love that phrasing.
Me too, because I'm looking at that, and it immediately implies structure.
Sure.
It implies that a tough conversation isn't just some random thing that happens to you. It's something you engineer.
You engineer it or you actively deconstruct it. I mean, John and Emma's entire premise in the text is that profound internal evolution creates very real social fallout.
Growth is never a solo event.
It never is. When you change, you force literally everyone around you to recalibrate.
And let's be honest, they usually really resent you for it.
Oh, they hate it. People hate being forced to adjust. So the analysts in this text are basically extracting the exact linguistic blueprints used when a person goes through this kind of internal evolution and has to, break the news to their social ecosystem.
They have to tell their people.
Right. It's all about redrawing those boundaries and managing perceptions when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Okay, let's unpack this structural idea for a second. Because mastering this kind of language, it seems to me like learning how to execute a controlled demolition on your own life.
A controlled demolition. Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Think about it. You have a building, right?
Okay.
And that building is your current career, or your current belief system, or your current social circle.
Yeah.
And the building has to come down. There's no stopping it. But you have to bring it down without destroying the entire neighborhood around it.
You can't just blow it up randomly.
Exactly. You need the structure to collapse inward safely into its own footprint. You don't want it exploding outward and just sending shrapnel into all the people you care about.
Which requires an exact, perfect understanding of the materials you're working with.
Yes.
If you use the wrong word during one of these volatile confrontations, you don't get that nice, neat, controlled collapse.
You get the catastrophic explosion.
Exactly. I mean, a controlled demolition requires physics. It requires placing the explosive charges in the exact right load-bearing pillars.
And in a conversation, those charges are specific words.
Spot on.
So what are the raw materials here? Before we jump into like a real-world scenario of this demolition happening, I really want to understand the vocabulary of this personal revolution that John and Emma are analyzing.
Where does the process start?
Yeah, exactly. Where's step 1?
It starts with the catalyst, the spark that lights the fuse, essentially. In the transcript, John introduces the first critical word in this sequence, which is disillusionment.
Disillusionment.
Right. And he defines it technically as the feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as one believed it to be.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back on that definition, though.
Okay, go for it.
Disappointment just sounds so, I don't know, mild. Like if I go to a restaurant and they're out of my favorite dish, I'm disappointed.
Right.
But that doesn't trigger a personal revolution. Why is John using a word that sounds so mundane for something that's supposed to be like a bomb going off?
Well, because we have to look past the modern everyday usage and dig into the etymology and the neurology, actually.
Yeah, unpack that.
Think about the word itself, disillusionment. It is the active, incredibly painful process of losing one's illusions.
Losing your illusions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we tend to think of illusions as like fun little harmless magic tricks, but psychologically speaking, our illusions are the fundamental load-bearing stories we tell ourselves about how the world works.
They're the pillars holding up the building.
Exactly. They are our safety nets. They are the core paradigms that keep our daily anxiety in check.
Give me a really concrete example of that. What does one of these structural illusions look like in practice for a normal person?
So John gives a really brilliant example in the text. He talks about a highly devoted political party member.
Okay.
And this person suddenly realizes that the leaders of their party do not actually practice the values they constantly preach.
Oh, man. That's a rough realization.
Right. And the illusion that just broke wasn't simply, oh, my leaders are nice, honest people.
What was it then?
The underlying illusion was, I'm on the side of moral righteousness.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is so much deeper.
Exactly. When that shatters, the brain experiences this profound cognitive dissonance. In fact, neurologically, your brain processes the breaking of a deeply held belief almost identically to physical pain.
Oh, wait, really? Like actual physical pain?
Literal pain. It activates the exact same neural pathways.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a bummer, it is a fundamental shattering of your worldview. Your brain is reacting to a threat to your survival.
Yeah. So the illusion of moral superiority is just gone. And what replaces it is this aching void.
Yes.
But disillusionment is still just an internal state, right? Like if I'm deeply disillusioned with my corporate job, I can still wake up and clock in every single day. I can just be quietly miserable.
Many people do exactly that for decades.
Right. So how does this move from just an internal painful feeling to an external demolition? How do we actually start speaking it?
It moves to the external phase when you reach the endpoint. And this is where the analyst Emma brings in the second critical word of the triad.
Okay, what is it?
Untenable.
Untenable. Gosh, it sounds so clinical.
It is entirely clinical, and that is exactly where its power comes from. Emma makes a very crucial distinction in her analysis here. She notes that a situation becomes untenable not just through some fleeting whim, right?
Not just like I'm having a bad week.
Exactly. And it's not just because you are fatigued or annoyed. It becomes untenable through a strict logical or moral necessity. It signifies the absolute, irreversible collapse of a prior state.
Okay, this is where that physics analogy really locks in for me. Because untenable removes all of the messy, subjective human emotion from the conversation.
Completely.
It replaces all that drama with cold, hard structural engineering. Like, think about a bridge. If an engineer says a bridge is structurally untenable, you don't argue with it.
No, you definitely
You don't try to negotiate with the concrete. You don't walk up and say, well, can't you just try to hold up these cars for like one more month? We'd really appreciate it.
The physics do not care about your feelings.
Right. The bridge literally cannot stand. The math says it falls.
Precisely. And let's look at why that specific framing works so well on a human brain during a confrontation.
Let's do it.
If you walk in and tell your partner, or maybe your boss, I'm so unhappy with the situation, what actually happens neurologically?
I assume they get defensive.
Yes, you instantly activate their amygdala, the fear and defense center. By using an emotional word like unhappy, you are essentially inviting them to negotiate with your feelings.
Oh, I see. They hear a problem they can fix.
Exactly. They'll immediately say, well, I can change, or we can adjust the workload to make you happy.
You've opened a negotiation without even meaning to.
You have. But if you walk in and say, this situation is untenable, you abruptly shift their processing away from the emotional center of the brain and into the prefrontal cortex.
The logic center.
Right. You are no longer discussing feelings at all. You are stating a structural fact of reality.
You're saying the structural integrity of this relationship has failed.
Yes. The breaking point has officially been passed. And linguistically, it acts as an absolute defensive shield against emotional manipulation.
Man, that is a powerful shield. But there has to be a cost, right? I mean, if I look around at my community and declare the way we are living is untenable, they aren't just going to nod, pack up my bags, and let me walk away quietly.
No, they absolutely will not. Which brings us to the final consequence. The third piece of this linguistic triad that Emma analyzes in the text.
The fallout.
Yes. The word is ostracized. The natural consequence of declaring a shared reality untenable is that you will be excluded or banished from that group or society.
Ostracized. Again, it just sounds like a word you read in a high school history book. It doesn't sound like something you worry about on a random Tuesday at the office.
It sounds distant, but the psychological weight of it is terrifying. We really have to dig into the history and the biology here to understand why.
Please do. Where does it come from?
The word actually comes from ancient Athens. The Greek word is ostrakismos.
Ostrakismus.
Yeah, and when the city wanted to banish a citizen who was deemed a threat to the democracy, they didn't just tell them to leave. They would actually hold a vote by writing the person's name on broken shards of pottery.
Wait, pottery?
Yes, pieces of broken pottery called ostraka. If enough people wrote your name on the ostraka, you were officially ostracized, which meant you were exiled from the city for 10 whole years.
Wow, so it's literal physical banishment.
A literal banishment. And biologically speaking, human beings are hardwired for tribal connection. For hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, to be ostracized from your tribe didn't just mean you were lonely for a while.
It meant you were going to die.
Exactly. It meant you were going to freeze to death or starve or be eaten by predators. We still carry that exact evolutionary hardware today.
So our brains haven't updated the software.
Not at all. When you risk being ostracized today, even if it's just from a corporate job or a friend group, your nervous system reacts as if you are facing literal physical death in the wilderness.
That makes perfect sense. Because if you question a community's sacred traditions, which Emma points out in the text, you are risking that ancient biological death sentence. The group feels threatened, so they have to expel you to protect their own illusions.
Exactly. So look at this devastating narrative arc that John has synthesized for us. It is a direct, inescapable chain reaction.
Disillusionment leads to the situation becoming untenable.
Right. The painful shattering of the worldview leads to the structural collapse. And if you actually have the courage to act upon that collapse, it ultimately results in being ostracized.
I really want you, the listener, to pause for a second and just map this onto your own life. Because this isn't just an abstract theory we're talking about here.
No, it happens every day.
Think of a time when you felt this exact sequence playing out. Maybe it was a career path that you spent a decade building, right? And you suddenly realized the corporate ladder you were climbing was leaning against the completely wrong wall.
That's a great metaphor.
You felt that creeping, painful disillusionment. And then came the realization that staying in that job was structurally untenable. Like it was literally making you physically sick.
But I bet you stayed anyway.
Exactly. You stayed for months, maybe years, because you were absolutely terrified of being ostracized by your professional network if you quit.
It is a universally human experience. But what John and Emma are arguing in this program is that having the exact, precise vocabulary to describe this sequence, it gives you power over it.
It names the monster in the room.
Right. It allows you to intellectualize what is otherwise a highly emotional, traumatizing process. When you feel that crushing pain of losing your community, you don't have to spiral into thinking, oh, I must be a terrible person.
I'm crazy. I'm wrong.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. You can recognize it simply as being ostracized, which is just the natural, inevitable consequence of stepping away from an untenable situation. It normalizes the trauma of your own growth.
Wow. Okay, so we understand the theory now. We have our raw materials. But how do you actually deploy these words in the wild? I want to look at conversation 1 from the source text.
The charity scenario.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you break down the scene for us? Where are we and who are these people?
All right, so we are in a very specific, very high-stakes environment. John and Emma analyze this conversation that's set in a quiet, rich-looking library or study.
Very dramatic.
Very. We have Daniel, who is the co-founder of a massively successful charity foundation, and he is basically cornering his close friend and co-founder, Mark.
Okay, Daniel and Mark.
Right. And Daniel is there to announce that he is stepping down from the charity.
So, just to be clear, this isn't like putting in your 2 weeks' notice at a local coffee shop.
Not at all.
This is their legacy. This charity is their life's work, it's their shared identity, and it's probably the source of all their social standing in their community.
Exactly. The stakes could not be higher. And look at Daniel's opening move here. He doesn't hem and haw. He doesn't beat around the bush. After Mark expresses shock at this sudden meeting, Daniel immediately drops our word.
He goes right for it.
He says his continued presence at the charity has become untenable.
Now, I'm looking at Daniel's response, and I have to ask you, why doesn't he just apologize?
Because an apology is weak there.
But why doesn't he try to soften the blow? I mean, if this is his best friend, wouldn't you naturally start by saying something like, Mark, man, I'm so sorry. I'm just incredibly burned out.
You might want to, but Daniel understands the mechanics of the controlled demolition. If he says, I'm burned out, Mark is just going to offer him a 6-month paid sabbatical.
Right.
And if he says, I'm stressed out by the workload, Mark will just offer to hire more support staff.
They'll offer a solution.
Exactly. By stating his position is untenable, Daniel frames his exit as a logical, inescapable endpoint. Emma brilliantly points out in her analysis that Daniel is using unimpeachable logic here.
He removes himself as the chaotic variable.
Yes. He makes the structural integrity of the charity itself the issue.
He basically builds a fortress around his decision before Mark can even attempt to breach the walls.
It's brilliant. He elevates the conversation way above a simple emotional disagreement. He says his presence is literally a betrayal of his own integrity because he can no longer solicit donations in good conscience.
Okay, so what exactly broke? Like, what is the core conflict driving Daniel to say this? How did he become so severely disillusioned with his own life's work?
So Daniel reveals to Mark that he recently visited their charity projects in situ.
On the ground.
Right, actually on the ground, in the communities they're supposedly helping. And the reality of what they were doing there just completely shattered his illusion of being this benevolent savior.
The illusion fell apart.
Completely. He explicitly tells Mark that their charity model is not empowering people at all. It is actually creating a cycle of dependency.
Oh, man. He realizes the machine is completely broken.
Worse than broken, honestly. He realizes they are just imposing their own Western cultural values under the guise of providing aid.
Wow.
And they are measuring their success in these totally hollow vanity metrics.
Like what?
Like dollars raised or how many gala tickets they sold to rich donors, instead of measuring sustainable, actual change for the people on the ground.
If I'm Mark in this situation sitting in that quiet study, I am absolutely panicking at this moment.
Oh, Mark definitely panics. And his reaction is super critical for us to analyze because Mark represents something very specific here. He represents the massive gravitational inertia of the status quo.
Mark is flailing.
Yeah.
According to the transcript, he actually calls Daniel's realization madness.
Yes, he tries to diagnose him.
Right. He dismisses it as a fit of philosophical peak. He immediately jumps to the institutional consequences, too, saying the board is going to think Daniel has lost his mind and the donors are going to be apoplectic.
It's textbook defense. Mark is deploying literally every weapon in the arsenal of the status quo to maintain his own comfortable illusion.
Let's break those weapons down.
Sure. First, he uses shame. He calls Daniel's profound realization madness. Then he minimizes it by calling it a fit of pique, basically implying Daniel is just throwing a temporary childish tantrum.
You'll get over it, buddy.
Exactly. And when those emotional tactics fail, he pulls out the ultimate threat. The donors, the money, the board of directors. He threatens Daniel with total institutional destruction.
Wait, let me stop you there. Isn't this the exact moment where the controlled demolition usually fails for most people?
Usually, yes.
Because when the other person threatens to burn your reputation to the ground, the natural human instinct is to fight back. You want to yell, you want to defend your character, you want to list all of Mark's hypocrisies.
That is absolutely the instinct. And if Daniel did that, if he took the bait, the conversation would instantly devolve into a catastrophic explosion, shrapnel everywhere.
But he doesn't.
He doesn't. Daniel executes a masterful rhetorical maneuver here. He completely neutralizes the threat of social exile. Mark is trying to hang the threat of being ostracized right over Daniel's head, but Daniel beats him to the punch. He preemptively accepts it.
He just accepts it like, okay, banish me.
Yes. Daniel literally says he expects to be completely ostracized by the very community they built together. He acknowledges that he will lose his standing, his party invitations, his stellar reputation among the elite donors.
He lays it all out.
And he says it is a price he has already calculated, and he has already made his peace with it.
Okay, I need to push back on this a little bit because to me, it feels almost a little arrogant.
Arrogant? How so?
Well, if you just walk into a room with your partner and say, hey, I don't care if you and everyone else hates me, I'm leaving, doesn't that make you sound like a narcissist? Where is the empathy for Mark in that?
Okay, that is a fantastic distinction to make. But we have to look closely at what Daniel is actually saying. He isn't saying, I don't care about your feelings.
What is he saying?
He is establishing an absolute boundary. Empathy is understanding how Mark feels, which Daniel does. But a boundary is refusing to let Mark's feelings dictate Daniel's morality.
Oh, that's good.
Right. This is the exact moment John and Emma highlight as a C2 level performance in the transcript, meaning it's an absolute native level mastery of linguistic nuance and strategy.
So how does preemptively accepting the punishment actually work strategically? Why is it a C2 move?
Think about the mechanics of leverage in an argument. Mark's only real leverage over Daniel is the threat of taking away Daniel's social standing.
Right, the gala tickets, the prestige.
Exactly. By already calculating and accepting that immense personal cost before Mark can even use it against him, Daniel completely strips Mark of all his social leverage. What can Mark possibly threaten him with now?
Nothing. It's like trying to blackmail someone with a secret they just published on the front page of the newspaper themselves.
Exactly. You cannot threaten a man with the very thing he has already voluntarily surrendered.
Wow. So Daniel forces the conversation to remain strictly on the terrain of ethics. He doesn't allow Mark to drag the debate down into the mud of, like, reputation management or donor relations.
He keeps it anchored to pure integrity.
Which leads to this incredible outcome. Daniel is executing a complete, total divorce from his own identity. He outlines his new plan to Mark.
And it's not an easy plan.
No. He isn't just quitting to go sit on a beach somewhere and write a memoir. He's going to start over from absolute zero.
Ground level.
Yeah. He tells Mark he is going to work directly with local leaders on grassroots initiatives. And he explicitly notes that it will be slower, it will be harder, and it will be far less glamorous.
Right.
But, he says, it will be honest.
He is abandoning the shiny illusion of the savior complex for the difficult, unglamorous reality of actual ground-level work.
Oh.
And look at the effect this has on Mark. The text specifically notes a long silence from Mark at this point.
The fight just grains out of him.
Exactly. In that silence, Mark's entire defensive structure collapses inward.
So what does Mark finally say to him?
Mark's final response is incredibly telling. He says he feels like the ground has just fallen away beneath his feet, but he admits he won't be the one to cast the first stone.
You won't be the one to attack Daniel.
Right.
So why does this matter to you, listening to this right now? Why are we spending so much time deeply analyzing the linguistic chess match of some fictional charity founder?
Because it proves a radical concept.
Exactly. It proves that it is entirely possible to completely dismantle your life's work, to walk away from the very thing that defines you to the outside world, while remaining clear, resolute, and completely devoid of accusation.
Daniel didn't attack Mark personally. He never called Mark a bad person or a fraud.
He kept it structural.
He preserved a thin thread of personal connection while completely severing the professional and ideological ties. It is a masterclass in separating the person from the paradigm.
He owned his disillusionment, he declared the structural reality untenable, and he absorbed the impact of being ostracized. He ran the demolition sequence flawlessly, and the building collapsed exactly where it was supposed to.
It really is beautiful. Now, John and Emma pivot their analysis in the second half of the source text.
We're leaving the charity world.
We're leaving the legacy world of charity boards and quiet library studies, and we are entering a landscape that is hypermodern, extremely loud, and requires a totally different set of linguistic tools to survive.
We are moving into the digital world, the influencer economy. And honestly, looking back at it, Daniel's boardroom seems almost quaint compared to the psychological warfare of the internet.
It really does.
Because if you broadcast your entire life to millions of people online every day, the social ecosystem you have to dismantle isn't just a few wealthy donors. It's a massive parasocial audience.
The landscape absolutely changes, but the core human struggle for authenticity remains exactly the same. However, the nature of the deception is very different here. And that brings us to the first word John introduces in this new digital vocabulary set.
What's the word?
Specious.
Specious. Can you spell that out for us and give us John's technical definition from the text?
Sure. It's S-P-E-C-I-O-U-S. And John defines a specious argument as one that seems plausible or correct on the surface, but is actually fundamentally wrong.
Okay.
It is a deceptively attractive but fundamentally fallacious line of reasoning.
You know, this feels like the defining concept of our current era, but I really want to understand how it tricks the brain. Because a specious argument isn't just an obvious lie, right?
No, not at all.
Like if someone tells me the sky is neon green, I dismiss it instantly. I don't fall for it.
Right. An obvious lie has absolutely no traction. A specious argument is infinitely more dangerous because it has the exact texture of truth.
It sounds good.
It sounds incredible. It flatters our existing biases. It uses this shiny veneer of logic to completely bypass our critical thinking filters.
I was thinking about how to visualize this concept, and the best analogy I can come up with is, well, two things, actually. First, it's like a Hollywood movie set.
Oh, I love that. Like a fake storefront.
Exactly. From the front, It looks like a magnificent, unshakable bank building. The marble looks real. But if you walk behind it, it's just cheap plywood and empty space holding it up.
That's a great visual. What was the second analogy?
The second one is that a specious argument is basically a financial Ponzi scheme of logic.
A Ponzi scheme of logic. Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about it. When you invest in a literal Ponzi scheme, it pays out immediate dividends at first, right? You get a fake statement in the mail saying, you made 20% this month.
And you feel like a genius.
You feel incredibly validated. You feel smart. Well, a specious argument does the exact same thing to your brain.
Ah, I see.
Someone online gives you this highly produced 5-step formula for success. It sounds incredibly logical, and it pays out an immediate dividend of validation and hope. You feel like you finally have the secret.
But fundamentally, at its core, it is completely bankrupt.
Yes, there is no actual mechanism generating wealth or truth. It relies entirely on the listener never asking to look at the underlying ledger.
That is a phenomenal analogy. It pays out emotional validation, but it is structurally bankrupt. And the crazy thing is, in the digital age, algorithms are literally designed to prioritize and amplify specious arguments.
Because they get clicks.
Because they generate the most immediate, passionate engagement. Nuance doesn't go viral. Carefully weighed evidence doesn't go viral. Specious, absolute certainty goes viral.
Wow. So when you finally wake up and realize you are participating in a Ponzi scheme of logic, when you realize the beliefs you are holding or the content you are creating is morally bankrupt, you face a choice.
A very hard choice.
How do you extract yourself?
This brings us perfectly to Emma's contribution to this new vocabulary set. The word eschew. E-S-C-H-E-W.
Emma notes in the transcript that this is a formal, intentional renunciation. It's much stronger than simply avoiding something. Why is that distinction between avoiding and eschewing so important here?
Because avoiding is a passive act, and it's almost always driven by convenience. I avoid a traffic jam by taking a different street. I avoid a difficult coworker by walking the other way down the hall.
You're just sidestepping it.
Right. But to eschew something is an active, deeply philosophical choice to give it up, and usually at great personal cost. Emma uses the example of a minimalist who chooses to eschew consumerism.
So they aren't just like avoiding the mall on a Saturday.
Exactly. They are deliberately severing ties with an entire cultural ideology.
It requires immense effort. You have to actively resist the gravitational pull of that specious argument every single day.
Yes, you do.
Right.
And what is the counterforce? What actually gives you the strength to eschew the comfortable, profitable lie?
That brings us to our final anchor word, presented by John in the text: veracity.
Veracity, pure truthfulness, conformity to facts, absolute accuracy.
It just sounds so solid, like bedrock.
It is the bedrock. When you are swimming in a sea of specious arguments, surrounded by these bankrupt logic schemes, veracity represents the desperate, fundamental human need for something real.
It's a craving.
It is a craving for a standard that actually holds up under intense scrutiny.
So if we link these three words together, we basically have a brand new narrative arc for navigating the digital modern life.
Let's hear it.
We identify a specious idea, we make the active, painful decision to eschew it, and we do so strictly because we are driven by a desperate need for an underlying standard of veracity.
That's the arc. It is a journey from profitable illusion to very costly truth. And as John and Emma show us in conversation 2 from the text, in a world that heavily monetizes illusion, seeking veracity can look a lot like career suicide.
Well, let's dive into conversation 2 then, because I want to know how the desire for veracity actually disrupts a highly profitable digital empire.
It gets messy.
The analysts take us straight into a home recording studio. Imagine the setting for a second, right? There is a slight echo in the room, there are expensive acoustic panels on the walls, and a glowing red recording sign above the door.
Very familiar territory for us.
Definitely. And we have Ben, who is this massively successful digital success guru, and his producer, Carla.
Right. So set the exact moment for us. What has just happened right before the dialogue starts?
So Ben has just finished recording a podcast episode for his massive, million-strong audience. He has been aggressively pushing his new Synergy program.
The flagship product.
Yep. He is hitting all the standard guru talking points perfectly, telling his audience that if they just follow his exact mindset steps, they will easily achieve financial independence.
Just buy the course and you're rich.
Exactly. But then the recording software stops, the red light turns off, and the source text gives us a very specific critical audio cue right here.
What is it?
Ben lets out a deep, incredibly heavy sigh.
Oh man, that sigh. That sigh is the auditory manifestation of severe cognitive dissonance.
It really is.
It is the sound of the psychological weight finally becoming too heavy for him to carry.
And so, the crisis in the studio begins. Ben turns to Carla and asks her a terrifying question. He asks if she ever questions the veracity of what they are actually selling.
He is confessing his internal crisis directly to the person responsible for monetizing his persona. That is an incredibly vulnerable, dangerous move.
It is. He admits that he's been looking at the actual outcomes of their program. And he doesn't mean the shiny testimonials they cherry-picked for the website. He means the real, raw data.
And what does the data show?
The results are mixed at best, mostly failures. He realizes their entire core narrative, this perfectly packaged 5-step financial freedom promise, is just one giant specious argument.
And notice how he deconstructs his own product here. He actually acknowledges to Carla that the pitch sounds incredible. It is highly, highly marketable.
Which is the nature of a specious claim.
Exactly. It is highly attractive. But he admits that their formula completely ignores systemic economic issues.
Yeah.
It ignores the massive role of sheer dumb luck. It completely ignores socioeconomic privilege.
He recognizes the Ponzi scheme.
Yes. He realizes he is selling a formula that only works if you deliberately ignore the complex, messy reality of human existence.
This is such an agonizing moral crossroads for him, because Ben didn't start this to be a scam artist, right? He got into this business a decade ago because he genuinely wanted to help people.
Most of them do start out that way.
But he realizes he has slowly, day by day, morphed into a salesman of a marketable fantasy. He says to Carla, and this quote is brutal, "When I listen back to my own voice, all I hear is a collection of persuasive but specious claims."
He is horrified by his own echo.
Yes, he's disgusted by it. And so he declares his intention to Carla. He tells her he needs to eschew this entire genre of guru-style content. He wants to walk away from the millions of dollars and the massive platform.
Now, we have to deeply analyze Carla's initial reaction here, because if Mark represented the inertia of the corporate status quo in the first scenario...
The guy with the gala tickets.
Right. If Mark was the corporate status quo, Carla represents the relentless friction of the digital marketplace. As a pragmatic producer, her literal job is to protect the brand, maintain the algorithm, and generate revenue.
So what does she do?
Carla immediately defends the specious narrative. She pushes back hard against Ben's crisis. She tells him, "You're giving people hope, Ben. That has real value."
Wow. This is the classic eternal tension between profitable illusion and uncomfortable reality. It really is the philosophical core of the entire influencer economy.
It absolutely is.
I want to push back on Ben's crisis here for just a second, though. I want to play devil's advocate for Carla's side of the argument.
Okay, let's hear it.
Doesn't the placebo effect have actual documented medical value? Like, if someone buys Ben's specious program and that false hope actually gives them the burst of energy to get out of bed, apply for a new job, and genuinely change their life, does it matter if the core logic was flawed?
That's the argument, yeah.
Isn't false hope better than a hard, depressing truth that just makes someone give up? Carla is arguing that the feeling of hope justifies the specious product.
That is the ultimate rationalization in that industry, and I will admit it's a very compelling one. I might be selling snake oil, but the placebo effect is making people feel good, so it's ethically acceptable.
Right, so why is Ben so upset?
Because here is where we have to look at the collateral damage of that philosophy. For every one person who uses that false hope to accidentally succeed, there are 99 people who follow the 5 steps perfectly, inevitably fail because the steps ignore reality, and then they deeply, internally blame themselves.
Oh, wow. The specious argument protects the guru and blames the follower.
Precisely. If the formula is marketed as perfect, then failure has to be a personal moral failing of the user. You just didn't want it enough. You didn't grind hard enough.
That's devastating.
Ben realizes this exact dynamic. He refuses to accept that selling a fantasy that ultimately leads to deep psychological disappointment for his audience is an ethical way to live anymore. He simply cannot compromise his fundamental need for veracity. The placebo isn't enough for him.
So Ben introduces his radical alternative. This is his masterstroke of authenticity. He proposes abandoning the multi-million-dollar success guru brand entirely. He just wants to burn the ship down.
And what does he want to build in its place? Let's look at the new architecture.
He wants to start a completely new podcast about the brutal, ugly realities of small business failure.
Failure. The exact opposite of what he was selling.
Exactly. He wants to interview people who mortgaged their houses, tried absolutely everything, followed all the rules, and still went completely bankrupt. He wants to discuss what they actually learned in the records of their lives. He explicitly states to Carla that he wants to prioritize veracity over virality.
Veracity over virality. I mean, that isn't just a catchy phrase. That is a profound, almost subversive thesis statement for the modern digital age.
He really is.
He is actively choosing a smaller, much more difficult, far less profitable, but infinitely more honest path. It's exactly like Daniel choosing grassroots charity work over the glitzy galas.
And this brings us to Carla's incredible turning point in the transcript, because this is where the digital scenario sharply diverges from the boardroom scenario.
Carla doesn't act like Mark.
No, she doesn't. Carla doesn't fight Ben to the bitter end like Mark did. Carla has this moment of silence in the studio, and then someone controls over. She just stops defending the specious brand. She suddenly sees the brilliance of the pivot.
What does she say?
Let me quote her directly from John and Emma's text. She looks at him and says, "That's either career suicide or the most brilliant, authentic pivot I've ever heard of."
This is where John and Emma's linguistic analysis is just so sharp. They point out that in this exact moment, Carla manages to reframe failure as authenticity. She recognizes the shifting tides of the massive media landscape.
I really want to explore that shifting tide because it is fascinating. Think about the world you, the listener, live in right now. We are absolutely drowning in specious claims.
Drowning them.
Every single time you open your phone, scroll through a feed, or check your email, someone is aggressively promising you a shortcut to wealth, perfect health, or infinite happiness. The supply of fake perfection is just infinite.
And basic economics tells us that when the supply of something is infinite, its value drops to zero. So, in a landscape that is completely saturated with specious perfection, what becomes the rarest, most highly valued commodity?
Truth, veracity,
Yeah.
the messy, unfiltered reality.
Exactly right. Veracity itself becomes the ultimate brand asset. Carla, as a brilliant producer, realizes that Ben's vulnerability is actually his new leverage.
His weakness is his strength.
Right. His willingness to dismantle his own specious empire in public, to bleed in front of his audience and embrace the ugly reality of failure, will attract an audience that is absolutely starving for something real.
She realizes that, yeah, the current audience who just wants the easy 5 steps might leave, but a new, fiercely loyal audience will replace them. Carla understands that the real ones, the tree audience, will follow Ben not because he is a flawless guru on a marble pedestal, but because he is an honest human standing in the trenches with them.
It's a profound shift in perspective. It is a conversation that begins with the agonizing death of a false persona and ends with the birth of a genuinely authentic creative partnership.
It is absolutely brilliant. And it shows that the controlled demolition doesn't always have to end in total isolation, right? You don't always have to destroy your relationships when you destroy your old identity.
No, you don't.
Sometimes, if you approach the demolition with enough vulnerability and veracity, you can actually bring your people along with you into the new reality. Carla stayed.
She did stay, which is exactly what John and Emma highlight in their concluding thoughts of the transcript. The entire journey they took us on, from the high society charity galas to the echoey digital recording studios, it proves a really vital point about language.
What's the main takeaway for them?
That the highest level of linguistic skill has absolutely nothing to do with ornamentation. It is not about using big, multisyllabic words to sound intellectually superior or to win a debate.
No, not at all. Synthesizing this entire deep dive, looking at both Daniel's boardroom and Ben's studio, it's so clear that mastering these specific concepts, disillusionment, untenable, ostracized, specious, eschew veracity, is actually about equipping yourself with a survival toolkit.
Emma reiterates this beautifully at the very end of the source text. She says mastering language is about precision. It is about the courage to name your reality accurately without flinching.
Without sugarcoating it.
Right. It is about deeply understanding human psychology and navigating profound, terrifying personal change with absolute integrity and grace.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, I want to speak directly to you, the listener. Think about your life right now.
Think about the structures you're living in.
Yes. Whether you are currently staring down the barrel of stepping away from a massive corporate commitment, or you are thinking about changing a career path that is slowly hollowing you out, or maybe you are just quietly painfully realizing that you are outgrowing a long-lost friend group.
Whatever it is.
Whatever your specific situation is, you now possess the linguistic architecture to execute that change.
You don't have to rely on explosive emotional outbursts anymore.
You really don't. You can execute the change clearly, you can do it firmly, and most importantly, you can do it without cruelty. You can declare a structural situation untenable without attacking the character of the people who are still choosing to live inside it.
You have the exact blueprints for the controlled demolition.
You know exactly where to place the charges.
Yes, you do.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought that builds on everything we've talked about today. It's something that wasn't explicitly written in John and Emma's text, but it is the logical conclusion of this entire framework. It's something for you to really chew on as you go about your week.
Let's hear it.
When you finally find the courage to face your own disillusionment, when you finally stand up, declare your situation completely untenable, and you brace yourself for the impact, preparing to face the fallout and be ostracized by your community, consider this possibility.
What if?
What if the people you are so terrified of alienating are actually secretly disillusioned too?
Oh.
What if they are also suffocating under the weight of the exact same specious arguments holding your group together? What if your terrifying breaking point, your moment of controlled demolition, is exactly the permission they've been desperately waiting for to finally tell their own truth?
What a profound question to end on. It completely reframes the entire risk. It reminds us that our courage, our demand for veracity, can actually be wildly contagious. I encourage you to keep questioning the specious arguments in your life, keep seeking veracity even when it costs you, and trust that your authenticity will ultimately act as a beacon, attracting the right community to build something totally new in the clearing you've created.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the architecture of your conversations, keep challenging your reality, and we will see you next time.